Hi, everyone. This is Raquel.
Hi, and this is Jennifer.
Welcome to Madness Cafe.
This is a feminist podcast where we talk about women's issues, politics, and health and wellness.
And where those issues intersect. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Madness Cafe. Today's episode is the first in a series that we are doing on gun violence, specifically ending gun violence. As we all know, gun violence is prevalent in the US. And the last several weeks, it's been maybe even more in the news than prior times because it's been so much in our attention than just things, mass shootings that happening rapidly, like just one after the other. For instance, the shooting in Buffalo in the grocery store a few weeks ago, and then literally right on the heels of that, the shooting at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas. Numerous others that have happened between those two, since those, and however many that'll happen by the time that this episode airs. I looked up some information, the Gun Violence Archive, which is an online archive of gun violence incidents collected from over 7,500 law enforcement, media, government, and commercial sources daily. They have no affiliation with any particular organization, so it's probably the most fair, even-handed information that we can find right now. But according to them, as of June 17th, there have been 20,141 deaths due to gun violence and 268 mass shootings. So more mass shootings than there are so far days in the year. That, unfortunately, and I know I sound very skeptical, but I think I'm being realistic. Unfortunately, that number will probably rise by the time that this episode airs. To join us in this conversation, we have the lovely Celeste Kanpurwala joining us, and she is the Michigan chapter leader of Moms Demand Action. Her activism inspires her to tell her story and has also inspired her to write a book, which she's in the process of editing. So Celeste, we have to have you back once that book is published, because we will read it and we will discuss it and we will have you back and we will help support it. So, but Celeste also has 2 boys and an amazing husband who she works tenaciously for every day, and they are her incredible cheerleaders and supporters. So Celeste, thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you for joining us in discussing such an unfortunate and sadly very timely topic.
Thank you for having me. It's important that we have the conversation. The more we talk about it and the more that we work to fix it, the more likely that will actually happen.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
More than fingers crossed, action.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Action,
right. Exactly. Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Celeste, thank you for being on. I saw a very passionate clip on your Instagram the other day. You were in, I believe, Ann Arbor at a rally, and you were talking about all of the things that piss you off. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I love that you say the things that piss me off, because the way that I wrote the speech, the initial script in my head was, I am so pissed, but I changed it to be more age friendly. You know, there were a lot of little ears around saying, I am furious. And so, yes, my speech was about all of the things that I'm so furious about. And as Raquel was hinting at, you know, the fact that we have a mass shooting every single day in this country, more than one on many occasions. And that means 4 more people shot. And that was the first thing. that I said that I'm furious about. And I talked about all of the different nuances that gun violence, all the different roles that it plays in our society. You know, the fact that Black Americans are 10 times more likely to be shot and killed than their white counterparts. The fact that 3 in 4 transgender deaths are by a gun. The fact that, and I don't know if I even said this fact in particular, but suicides make up 2/3 of gun deaths. But
Wow.
suicides themselves, the ones that are completed, 50% of them are with guns, because they're unfortunately a very effective means. And when you have a gun present, when you're feeling suicidal, you're much more likely to unfortunately die at the hands of your own gun.
Right.
And I mean, I myself, I'm a survivor. I mentioned that in my speech as well, that my dad shot and killed himself the day after my birthday in 2014. As you can imagine, my birthdays have never been the same since. And so that's been really tough. A couple of years after he died, I joined Moms Demand Action. And I didn't even know going in, I didn't see myself as a survivor of gun violence. We actually have a form when you sign in for our meetings. There's a little box that you can check if you're a survivor of gun violence. And that didn't resonate. It didn't click with me at all. And I happened to sit across from the woman who founded our Michigan chapter of Moms Demand Action. Her name is Kristen Moore, and she's here in Ann Arbor. I'm in Ann Arbor. I happened to mention the fact that my dad took his life with his shotgun, and she looked across the table at me and she said, "You're a survivor." And it took me a while to come to grips with that. But once I did, and once I figured out that my voice was important in the movement to talk about the role that guns play in suicide, and especially as a mom, that's why I joined Moms Demand Action, is because I want a safer place for my children. You know, but as a mom and as a grieving daughter, you know, all of our stories are important. And so I became basically a spokesperson for Moms Demand Action in becoming a survivor fellow in 2018 and telling my story and just wanting a safer future for my kids.
You bring up your dad's suicide, and you didn't realize, it didn't occur to you that that meant that you too were a survivor of gun violence. And I wonder, because I don't know that I necessarily would have thought of that either. And so I wonder how many people listening might be having, you know, sort of an epiphany right now, hearing you say that. So thank you for mentioning that, because I think that might be helpful for some people listening. Can you talk a little bit about what it meant for you to be a survivor fellow? What was involved in that, and how did that inform or maybe affect your activism as far as gun violence or ending gun violence?
Sure. So, well, as I mentioned, I joined in 2016, or maybe I didn't say that, but I joined in 2016 when I was very pregnant with my youngest son. So I can always easily remember how long I've been a Moms Demand Action volunteer, because Noah was born 2 weeks later. I joined because the mass shootings that take place in the media were capturing my attention and freaking me the hell out, as they do many people. And my husband actually found Everytown, which led me to Moms Demand Action and led me to my first meeting, where I found out that I'm a survivor. And interestingly enough, I was deathly afraid of public speaking for many, many years. Being a survivor fellow, you tell your story, which we'll get into in just a moment, but I want to kind of give you the backstory of me joining and how I learned about it.
Perfect.
So I was asked, after becoming a volunteer, I had been a volunteer for about a year maybe, when I was asked to tell my story in front of a small crowd of people. And I said no right away, for two reasons. I said no. Well, one, it was still pretty fresh, and I understand that everybody's grieving process is different. I always say grief is not linear. It's different for everyone. Some people are ready to talk about things right away. Other people are not. I was not ready to talk about it in such a public setting at that point, but also because I was just so scared of talking in front of people. But what really kind of changed me was we have an annual conference for Moms Demand Action, and I went to our annual conference in 2017. This was just a couple of months after I turned down that speaking engagement. And I met an incredible man named Frederick Wright, who his son was murdered at the Pulse nightclub in 2016, just a year prior. I'll never forget. I was nursing my youngest son, Noah, when I read about it and just started sobbing. I'm bisexual, and I used to go to clubs all the time, gay clubs all the time. And so that one really, really hit me hard. And so when I met Frederick Wright at our conference in 2017, and I found out that his son was murdered at the Pulse nightclub, I gave him a huge hug, and I noticed that he had a name tag on that said Survivor Fellow. And I said, "What's that? What does that mean?" And he said, "Oh, it's a program that we have for survivors, where you can tell your story and help." What we say is it helps change hearts and minds, because you can sit there and read statistics all day long, and they're numbers, but we know those numbers, there's faces behind those numbers, and there's people, and there's grief, and it's such a complicated thing. Just something after meeting him and thinking, wow, he's out there telling his story a year after his son was murdered. It gave me courage, and it gave me strength. The following, I think later that year, is when I applied for the Survivor Fellowship program, and I was accepted in February of 2018. And before I even went to my training in April of 2018, I helped plan and march at the 2018 March for Our Lives in March of 2018. And I spoke in front of 5,000 people at Pioneer High School in Ann Arbor. Yeah, that was like my introduction back into public speaking for the first time in years. Now I do it on a regular basis, and I'm much more comfortable with it. I mean, I still get nervous here and there, of course, but if I'm prepared, I'm generally okay. I like to write my speeches out. Jennifer, the clip that you saw of me, I had my speech nice and written out, so I knew what to say. But yeah, that's how I got involved. And then I've transitioned between different roles within the organization over the last 6+ years, almost 6.5 years now. When I became the Washtenaw County local group leader, in charge of the rest of the leaders, kind of coordinating the leaders here in Washtenaw County and coordinating our meetings, I decided to step down from the Survivor Fellow role, because then I also became a national mentor, helping to mentor other leaders within the organization. And we're volunteers, we don't get paid, and there's only so much I can do,
Yeah,
and I don't want to take too much time away from my kids. So that chapter of being a Survivor Fellow is behind me, but I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to be a part of it and to be such a change.
I still have one question about that part before we move on to the other. When you were able to tell your story in front of an audience, what did it do for you on a personal level?
That's a tricky question, because it's very emotional. And it's very draining. And that's another reason, Jennifer, actually, why I stepped down from the Survivor Fellow role, because I found that when I was telling my story, it just took a lot out of me. I needed a lot of time for self-care. And I want now to be able to amplify other people's voices and, you know, kind of passing the baton over. There's so many good things that come out of it. You know, Raquel, like you said at the beginning, me telling my story and perhaps others resonating with it and realizing that they too are a survivor. I've had people come up to me and say, oh my gosh, I remember one person came up to me and said that they realized after 42 years that they were a survivor because their loved one had died 42 years prior from firearm suicide. And so, you know, we definitely see, you know, and we see politicians actually changing laws and doing things by listening to our stories. So there's a good and a bad side to telling your story when you're a survivor, because it can be very, for lack of a better word, very, very triggering. But it's also very, very necessary.
Thank you for doing it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for being so vulnerable and for all the work that you're doing to help so many people. You noted that telling your story actually puts a face to the stats and the numbers, and it's getting laws changed. Can you maybe talk to some of the change that you've seen that has felt most significant to the work that you've been doing, and maybe that you see as a direct result of the work that you and Moms Demand Action have been doing?
Well, I can tell you right off the bat, we're very excited that the federal legislation that is being worked on by the Senate right now is the first time in 26 years that we are seeing any sort of gun safety legislation. So
26 years?
It's been 26 years since we've had any gun safety legislation.
Jesus.
It's insane. It's insane.
It is. It is. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, because I've seen a lot of controversy about that proposed legislation. Do you think that the legislation, if passed, what do you think of it? Is it going to help us?
I do. I actually, I gave an interview the day, I think it was the day that it was announced or the day after, just this past week. And what I said is that, yes, it will absolutely save lives. Does it have everything in it that we want? Absolutely not. You know, the House has come up with a much stronger bill, a set of legislation that we would love to see passed. But at this point, we'll take anything we can get, because as I said, it's been 26 years. And we know that just saving one life, that's one family less that has to deal with this kind of grief and this pain. So we'll do whatever we can to save as many people as we can. But if it's just one person, then it's one person. But I have no doubt in my mind that this legislation is going to save multiple people. The one thing that I'm really excited to see in the bill is the fact that they're working to close what's known as the boyfriend loophole, and making sure that domestic abusers do not have ability to purchase a firearm. Because at this point, it's just been if it's a spouse, but we know that women are just as likely to be abused by their boyfriend or their girlfriend than their spouse.
So there was no protection before now for women being threatened and killed by a significant other that they weren't married to?
Correct.
Jesus.
Yep. And that's another thing. And this is why gun violence is so intricate and nuanced. It took me just up until the last couple of years for me to also recognize that I'm a survivor of domestic abuse as well, because my dad, prior to taking his own life with his gun, he played Russian roulette in front of my mom as I was a baby sleeping in the room next to him.
Oh my gosh.
I don't believe he ever threatened myself or my mom with the gun, but he was certainly physically and emotionally abusive and manipulative growing up. It's taken a long time for me to even try to grasp everything that has happened. And
Right.
when you lose someone to suicide in such a violent way, and such a very sudden way, you know, and you have all of these underlying feelings of dealing with so my dad suffered from depression his whole life. I mean, since he was at 10 at the youngest that I know of, he suffered from depression for a long time. But you know, what I always tell my mom is that's not an excuse for that's not an excuse for what he did. It's very difficult.
So in your dad's case, if they had passed the red flag laws, that could have potentially saved his life and many others.
Yeah. That's something that I've been advocating for years now. And I know specifically in Michigan, and let me just back up for a second to make sure that folks know what a red flag law is. So a red flag law is also known as an extremist protection order. And what it does is it gives a loved one, a close family member, to have guns removed from someone who is threatening either themselves or others. And so, yes, my dad absolutely, had I even known that he had first of all, I didn't even know he had the shotgun. Second of all, I didn't even think it was possible to kill yourself with a shotgun just because of the logistics of it, but it definitely is. And so, yeah, had I known about it, I definitely would have wanted there to be a red flag law in place. And that is one of the bills that has been sitting collecting dust on the desk of Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey here in Michigan, because he has refused to have a hearing, let alone a vote, on any sort of gun safety legislation.
So why do you think it is that, I mean, I'm pretty sure I know, but why do you think it is that he won't even have a hearing or a discussion or anything, any progress at all on gun legislation?
Well, he was quoted in one of the articles I read as saying that if we enact these gun safety laws, then our state or our society will become unrecognizable.
Oh,
and to me, I'm like, wait a second. So you want us to go down in history as being a society with a proliferation of guns, shooting and killing each other, like we're the wild, wild west over here? And that to you is more, that to you looks more recognizable than actually having some gun restrictions, some gun safety measures in place. Yes. We don't like the term gun control because we're not trying to control people, but what we do want is for there to be gun sense and gun safety.
Right. I smell gun lobby. Maybe that's having something to do with why he won't talk about things.
Fortunately, the NRA controls the legislatures. It's very extreme. I'm actually reading this incredible book right now. It's called Gunfight by Ryan Bussey. And Ryan, I actually had the opportunity to meet him a few weeks ago. He is with Giffords. He's with gun owners. Giffords, I'm going to get it mixed up, but it's gun owners with Giffords anyway. He's a gun owner. He used to work in the industry. And he tells his story in here, and some of the things that he's exposing in this book that take place in the gun industry will just completely blow your mind. And it really just goes to show that the NRA is totally in control.
That's I think one of the most frustrating points is we have this extreme violence. It's all over the news. We all cry, gather together, get upset, go to rallies. And then it seems like then nothing happens. And then there's this ultimate silence that kind of settles over. And I felt this time with Uvalde that there was more silence than ever. Like this, there was this group that just seemed to be like giving up, which is why I kind of went on this search to find Mom's Demand and start to be a volunteer and possibly even running for school board, because I'm like, we can't give up. But it leaves me questioning, when you put all your time and effort, or some of your time and effort, and all these women and men across the United States put their time and effort, and 90% of people want sensible gun control, can we actually affect any sort of change? You having done this for 6 years, can we?
We have to. We don't have a choice. Like you said, we can't
Right.
give up. We just had a campaign. Moms in Action went to the Capitol in Washington, D.C., and our campaign was called Don't Look Away. And we had that hashtag all over social media, Don't Look Away, reminding our legislators to not do what you just said. And that after these things happen, first they say, oh, it's too soon, we can't talk about any sort of gun safety legislation. And we're over here saying, no, it's too late.
Right.
It's way too late. It's years, it's decades too late. We have to keep talking about it. We have to enact change. And, you know, Shannon Watts, our founder, she actually had a really great post on her Instagram or Twitter, possibly both. She likes to take pictures of her Twitter and then post it on Instagram, where she, you know, one of her friends said to her, how do you keep going? And she's like, what's the other option? It's not like we have a choice here.
Yeah.
And so we can't give up. You know, I oftentimes equate it with the civil rights movement, and that it took so many years. I mean, think about slavery, think about all of these things that people know the right thing. People know that they're effed up, that they're, you know, they know, but it's the folks who are actually going to have the courage to stand up to basically the bullies in like the gun lobby and the NRA, who are trying to dangle these threats above our legislators. And we can't let them win.
You know, I appreciate you bringing up the civil rights movement and kind of making that that comparison, because what I liked about your speech that you made at the March for Our Lives rally, where, you know, you posted on Instagram and you were holding your notes, is that you put a lot of faces to the gun violence and the drive for gun common sense regulation. You put a face to a lot of that. I mean, you brought up domestic violence survivors, Black and brown kids who are subject to a higher rate of death by gun violence. You brought up trans people who are subject to greater instances of gun violence. I mean, so thank you for that you're helping to humanize this fight. So kind of taking it away from just, oh, you're going to take away my guns. You know, it's not about your possession. It's about lives. It's about actual people.
Yeah.
So
and common sense.
And common sense. Yes, absolutely. So can you talk to that a little bit about how that seems to be maybe a more recent focus of humanizing the fight to end gun violence and not just talking about the weapons themselves?
Yeah, well, and one of the things that we have that does really put a face to gun violence is we have a website, momentsthatsurvive.org, and that's connected to Everytown. And we have a plug for it, or rather a a social media campaign around Moments That Survive on the first week of February every year, because by the end of January, we've had more gun deaths in America than any other industrialized nation has in their entire calendar year.
Oh my
So
God.
in 1 month.
Jesus.
So that's why the first week of February, we advocate for our gun violence survivors, and Moments That Survive is full of people who have submitted their stories, survivors like myself. My story is up there. And actually, I think if you scroll down, you could still see the video. We had a camera crew come up to our house a couple of years ago and to help me tell my story. And I was part of a 4-person video telling our stories about gun violence. And, you know, I've got to really hand it to Chris Kocher. Was our former he was our director of the Everytown Survivor Network, and he started it. He had this idea. He went down to Arizona after Gabby Giffords was shot down there. He said, you know, what can I do to help? And he had this idea to create a platform for us survivors to be able to tell our stories, to help change hearts and minds. March for Our Lives kids too, you know, seeing their stories and hearing from the children. I mean, I'm just in awe of the children telling their stories. And I mean, I saw clips of the kids in elementary school who were up there on the stage at the open mic portion of the March for Our Lives. And I just think to myself, good God, how did we get here? Why are we here? That these little elementary school students are having to talk about going through active shooter drills. It's insane.
What are your thoughts on the active shooter drills?
Interestingly enough, I just had a conversation with our school superintendent here in Ann Arbor. I was just at a Juneteenth festival here in Ann Arbor, tabling with Moms Doing Action. Hence, I have my Moms Doing Action pin on, and I usually have a shirt on, but today for Juneteenth, I'll stand up and show. I have my Say Their Name shirt on. I thought that was appropriate for today for Juneteenth. And so I was on the phone with my mom actually, and I was like, Mom, I gotta go. I gotta talk to somebody. I saw Dr. Swift, our school superintendent, and I ran over and I said, remember me? We worked together in March for Our Lives in 2018. And we talked about active shooter drills, Jennifer, because I said to her, I said, you know, I've had conversations with our school principal, and he has told me that they don't do active shooter drills in Ann Arbor or at our school. And I asked her, I said, is that true? And she said, we actually don't do active shooter drills in the district because we know that they are traumatizing. And I'm like, thank God, because Everytown has done the research. If you go to our Everytown research page, it talks about the traumatization of these children who are exposed to active shooter drills. Not only are they not going to be effective if somebody actually does come in with a freaking AR-15, because I mean, nobody stands a chance. I mean, right. The police, you saw the police in Uvalde. Yeah, they were too scared to even go in there because they knew that they were outgunned by this guy. Mm-hmm. So not only are they ineffective, but they are traumatizing our children. And so we advocate for no active shooter drills because we know what they do to our children.
Right. When the Michigan shooting in Oxford happened, I don't know, maybe that was 6 months ago or so now. My first response as a mom was to like come home with my kid and be like, what are you doing? What will you do? How will you get out? And then I had to like stop myself because I'm like, what are you trying to do to your kid here? But my mind was just like reeling, like, how do I keep my kids safe? You know, and I don't know. Our kids aren't safe. They're just not.
And it's not just our kids though. I mean, it's all of us. I mean, we can't even go to the grocery store or go to a place of worship or go to a movie theater or
you're right, Raquel, you're right.
Go to a mall. I mean, I don't know how we aren't all walking around in abject fear every minute of the day.
I'm walking around in fear. I walked around my town getting ready for the fair, and I looked at the fair in the morning as I'm jogging through with my dog, and I thought, perfect place for a shooter. Could come in here and just all the people at the fair. That's the thought I'm having in my mind when I walk around now.
Yeah. My anxiety got so bad that I finally, 3 years ago, I started taking anti-anxiety medication. And I mean, it was a long time coming. I had needed it for a long time, but being in this movement, I mean, while just being in everyday society and seeing the toll that gun violence is taking, but especially having an active role as a Moms Demand Action leader and hearing these stories day in and day out, I knew that I needed something to calm me down, because Jennifer, just like you, I would go anywhere I would go. I would be looking over my shoulder. I would be looking for the nearest exit. I would try to get in and out as quickly as possible. And that's no way to live. We should not have to live like that. It's disgusting.
No, it's like terrorism. It's like we are living through terrorism in the US, terrorism by our own people, by the NRA, by the gun lobby, by...
It's homegrown terrorism. It is homegrown.
It
so,
is.
You know, that brings up something that I've thought about a lot. And that comes up for me every time there's any kind of mass shooting. Is there any sort of therapy or counseling that's provided to their survivors or the families? I mean, the bystanders. I mean, is there anything done to help people, or is it just, you didn't get shot today, see ya? I mean, is there anything done to help anybody?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked, because every town does partner with BetterHelp.
Okay.
And it used to be Give an Hour, and now it's BetterHelp. But for any of our survivors within our network, and anyone can join, if anybody is listening and identifies as a survivor of gun violence, and that can be a number of things. If you were threatened with a gun, if you lost someone to gun violence, if you are a survivor of domestic abuse, there's a myriad of ways that one can be a survivor of gun violence. And you can go to our website, everytown.org, as well. But on our website, we actually do provide a resource for survivors who are part of the network. And partnering with BetterHelp, it does provide free therapy services, and you will be connected with someone. And I believe I think everything is still over Zoom or telehealth right now. But I did have a free therapist for a while through Everytown, being a survivor.
Okay, and I'll put links to all of that in our show notes so that people can access it, so they don't have to feel like, oh my God, I didn't write that down. So
one of the biggest things that I've heard over the years while I've tried to understand this, I've tried to talk to people I know who are against the background checks, against the red flag laws. One of the things they've always said to me is, you have to have guns out there because you have to put guns in the hands of the good guys so they can shoot the bad guy with the gun, because that's the only thing. How does Moms Demand counteract that argument?
Well, I can kind of refer back to what we were just talking about with the police not even wanting to go into the active shooting that was taking place in an elementary school because they were outgunned. I can think of only one case, and I'm sure there's more, but there was one high profile case of a good guy with a gun who did take down a bad guy with a gun. And that was at the church in Texas a few years ago, where, gosh, I want to say it was over 20 people were killed in that one. It was really, I mean, they're all terrible. But the fact is, even the police who are highly trained shooters miss, I forget what the percentage is, but they miss a good portion of the time. And these folks who are so pro-gun and pro-Second Amendment, they want to arm everyone to the teeth. I mean, we have more guns than we have people in this country.
Right.
And they want to arm everyone to the teeth, but not even have proper training.
Including the teachers now.
Yeah, now that's
apparently,
scary.
Yeah.
who they want to let go after, go around with a gun after one day of training. I believe was that in Florida, where it was just said like, oh, you've had one day of training, go ahead, you're fine.
Yeah, I think.
But the teachers can't even get money to have enough school supplies, but they're going to provide them with guns.
Yeah, not a good idea.
I think that situation, to me, if I were a teacher, I was armed with a gun, there's a possible active shooter, it's a kid that I was a teacher of, my student walks into the school, into my classroom, and I'm supposed to make the decision, do I shoot my former student? What if I miss? What if I shoot one of my current students?
Right.
That's just too much. I'm
Or
sorry,
what if
but
one
that's
of your kids gets the gun and accidentally hurts somebody else?
right. Or what if somebody walks into the classroom and you're scared and you just shoot somebody who, there's too much that could just go wrong in that scenario. There's very little that could go right and too much that could go wrong.
Right.
Exactly.
You posted, Celeste, on your blog, boldbravegoddess.com, you posted a number of ways that people can help end gun violence. I mean, obviously there's, all of you've alluded to a lot of the things today but I would love it if you would go over some of them. I mean, I can read off all 10 if you want, and then you can just kind of pick some, or if you just want to, just whatever comes to mind for you right now that you think maybe would be the top 2 or 3 that people can utilize, maybe in their own day-to-day lives.
Sure. Well, and I do want to point out that I wrote that after the Oxford shooting. So this was, sad to say, 6 months ago, and much has changed since then.
Okay.
So the first thing that comes to mind that people can do on a day-to-day basis is have these conversations. Have the conversations with strangers, have them with your family members, and have the uncomfortable conversations and really try to get to the meat of the issue, and not just, oh, you want to take my gun, Aunt Sally over here who wants to, sleep with her gun under her bed. Is that really a good idea? Right? Because we know that people who have a loaded, unlocked weapon are much more likely to have that weapon used on them if someone were to break in, or to use that weapon on themselves via a suicide. So have the conversations, especially have the conversations if you have children and they're going over to somebody else's house who you don't know if they have guns, making sure that those guns are locked up and they are unloaded, the ammunition stored separately. That's very important, because we say they weren't an accident, they were preventable. So therefore we use the word unintentional rather than accidental, because we know that they're preventable shootings. So that's number 1. Number 2, I'm going to give a shameless plug right now, because we have a really great app and I've been using it more lately. It's called Demand Action, is our Moms Demand Action app. And on that app, it actually has a ton of resources, actions that people can take. We actually have a summer action series right now where you'll be prompted with an action that you can take that takes 20 minutes or less once a week throughout the summer.
Oh, cool.
Yep. And you can also look up local events on there. So you can plug in your address or zip code and it will come up with the nearest upcoming events to you. I'm trying to think what else I put in that list, because again, it was 6 months ago. I know I always advocate for people to talk to your, don't be afraid to talk to your legislator. That was one thing that I didn't mention earlier when I talked about putting the pressure on Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey. I know he likes to try to say, that if you're not his constituent, that, he essentially doesn't have to listen to you. But I call bullshit on that, because he is the Senate Majority Leader and he is the one who makes the decisions for the entire state. So he can listen to all of us. And there's no reason why we should feel intimidated to call him, because he works for us.
Right.
He makes these laws. And, and I get so many people saying, what can I say? I just answered an email last night. Do you have a script for me? And I'm like, first of all, I'm a rule breaker. So I don't usually follow scripts if I'm given them anyway. But I also think that scripts can be they're not as personal,
Mhm.
So, and I'm just straightforward. I told the person, I said, when I call Senator Shirkey, I say my name, I say where I live. And I usually say something to the effect of, I'm a mom and you've been promising us these safe storage and red flag law bills now for years, and you haven't done anything, and it's time we take action. It's beyond time we take action. And I mean, if that's all you say, then that's it. You don't, people get really hung up on, oh, what are the bill numbers? I need to know all the bill numbers. You don't have to know the bill numbers. You just know what you're asking for. You want gun safety, and just make that clear, and you'll get the point across.
Perfect. I know when people are voting, there's always sort of clearinghouses for, oh, this person is running and here are their stances on X, Y, and Z, or here's their stance on the economy or whatever. Is it also possible for people to look up people who are going to be on their ballots, or people who are running for school board or anything like that? Is it possible for them to look up what each person's stance is on gun issues?
Yes. So we are still in the middle of getting our website updated, but we do have a website, gunsensevoter.org, and you can look up on there to see if your legislators have what we call our gun sense distinction. And currently we are getting applications from our politicians, people who are running for office. We're having folks reach out to us asking for, there's a questionnaire that they have to fill out. And based on the answers in that questionnaire, they will either get approved or denied gun sense distinction status.
Perfect.
That's super helpful.
Yeah. And this year is the first year, I believe, that we are, or it might have been last year, actually. We didn't have a local election last year, or a big election last year, but I think it was started last year, where we are accepting not only our state and federal legislators, but we're going down even to a local level as well. So city council, school board, commissioner, mayor, they can all get the gun sense, they can all apply for the gun sense distinction.
And that's nationwide?
Nationwide.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes, there is a little bit of a longer turnaround time right now to get it, because we are accepting so many more folks at this time, but we think it's really important that people know who they're voting for. And, I was talking with someone running for city council at an event that I was at on Thursday night, and she was kind of, she wanted to talk about it, but she was like, oh, well, I don't know if there's much I can do on the city council level. And I said, absolutely. We just had our city council in Ann Arbor, and we also had, we had Saline, and we had Pittsfield Township. We had the commissioners. They all passed national gun violence awareness resolutions for the first weekend of June, declaring it National Gun Violence Awareness Day and Gun Violence Awareness Weekend, also known as Wear Orange, because orange is the color that hunters wear in the woods, so they're not shot at. So that's our color that we wear the first weekend of June in honor of gun violence survivors and victims.
That's awesome work. I see, for me, and many other people I've talked to, this is a really important episode, and I appreciate you so much, because it feels hopeless sometimes. And just hearing that you're out there doing it, and things are happening. Even that is huge. Just having the awareness is huge.
It is hard, Jennifer. We all have days where we just need to cry, scream, put our head down. I do puzzles. That's one of my ways of doing self-care. I also run and do yoga, but when I really just need a moment to not think about anything, I go and I work on my puzzle, because it can feel very hopeless. And another thing that I tell people is gun violence can feel very lonely as well, especially after seeing these horrific shootings in the news and thinking, am I safe? Are my kids safe?
Yeah.
And it just takes your breath away. You feel so lonely. And so I just want to remind people that you're not alone, and that there is a movement of us working on this, and you can definitely be a part of it at, Moms in Action. I also give a plug for all of the other great gun violence prevention organizations too. There's not just Moms in Action. There's the Brady campaign, and there's Giffords, and there's the Newtown group, Sandy Hook Promise. We all do different things, but we all want the same goal. We all want to end gun violence.
Yeah, absolutely. If you could say anything to our audience, do you have any final thoughts for them?
I would just say that to not be discouraged, to keep going. Our founder, Shannon Watts, always says it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
We have actually come a long way since Sandy Hook took place nearly 10 years ago. It's just not as prominent in the media, because they don't talk about the bad gun bills that weren't passed. They only talk about the bad gun bills that are passed, or if a good gun bill does get passed in a certain state, it might get a little bit of attention. But 99% of the time, Moms Demand Action volunteers prevent bad gun bills from passing. So that is a huge accomplishment in and of itself.
Oh my gosh, that's so huge.
Wow.
It's so huge.
Wow.
Thank you for all the work you do. I really appreciate it. And thanks for speaking with us today.
Yes, Celeste,
Thank you for
so
having
much.
me.
Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
please keep doing the work that you're doing, and please keep supporting other people and mentoring more people so that they can continue to do the work as well. So thank you very much for being with us and talking about such an important topic.
Thank you.
It's interesting that Celeste said at the end that Shannon Watts says it's a marathon, not a sprint, because what keeps coming up for me, and this comes up for me in all of the fights that we have to fight, and all of the movements and all of the change that needs to be made, is yes, it's a marathon, not a sprint, but also take care of yourself. Take time to recharge and take care of yourself, but then come back to it. Come back to the fight, the cause, however you want to call it, because we need everybody in this. Like she said, it's not just moms, it's everybody. And there's an opportunity, there's an organization for everyone who wants to get involved. And we all need to be involved in this.
Yeah. I feel it in the pit of my stomach. I feel it in my chest. My body reacts in such bad ways to this topic, because it's you and I had that episode about fear, and you said, Jennifer, you don't fear anything. This I fear, because it's so beyond our control, and it seems so random. It's not. It's perpetuated, but it feels so random when something gets hit. And it could be anybody and anywhere. Right. And I just feel it in the pit. And so what was really helpful to me about today's episode is that I need to have hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just need to have hope.
Yeah. And honestly, I kind of want to push back on that you say that it's out of our control, because I think in some ways it is in our control. I think that's maybe the point of the work that Celeste and Moms Demand Action and Everytown and Gun Sense Voter and all of these groups and all of these volunteers and all these people, that's the point of the work that they do, that we do have some control. And so I just want to push back a little bit on you saying that we
It's
don't
okay.
control.
You're not hurting my feelings.
I know.
It's yeah, that's the hope I need, that we need to take back our power.
Yeah.
Thanks, Raquel.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Bye. Tough topic, and 1 out of 3 episodes, so stay tuned.
Yes. Thanks everyone for listening today. We will be back with more Madness Cafe next week. You can find us on Instagram at Madness Cafe Podcast or email us at madnesscafepodcast@gmail.com. Bye.